Sheldon Mosher, and I grew up in Fairhope, and I went to the Marietta Johnson School from about 1958, if my memory is correct, until 1971. And from the beginning, I felt like the elementary grades up until like the fifth and sixth was very much a Marietta Johnson education I got, and then after that it changed very differently.
My name is Trey Wood. I think I went to organic from 1958 until 71, if my memory serves me correctly. I remember a lot of, what I think I remember the most about going to school here was walking between the buildings, going to classes, more than anything else. Instead of going down one corridor to different rooms in one building, you almost always went to another building. You got out in the sunshine for just a few minutes between classes.
And each building was very different. So you're going to another new thing.
Just a totally different environment in every building. Each building had its own personality.
Probably the best would start at the elementary and just kind of work up.
I guess.
Yeah. I remember all my early years as being very happy ones. I remember putting on a play in the room next door when we were in the third life. That was the first time that I realized I was in a grade, because in the first life we were first and second grade mixed and didn't know it. And in the third life it was very definitely the third graders were on this side of the room and the fourth graders were over here. At that time I remember Trey was in the third, when he was in third grade and I was in the fourth, he skipped over and joined my class. But it was in the same room. The teacher would work with this group and then work with that. So that was interesting. It was always kind of nice to get into the Bell building because the other buildings were on the other side of the campus. And when you came to the Bell building, you felt like you had arrived.
There was a path across the campus there that people used to go to the grocery store, I guess, get into town. That path was the dividing line.
Yes, you never passed it unless you're going to folk dancing or ceramics. But when you finally got to be able to be on the other side for your regular classes, it was, you had arrived kind of thing. The 7th and 8th grade were the ones, or no, it was 6th grade that got to ring the bell, wasn't it?
5th or 6th.
But yeah, and
that's third life, 5th and 6th.
Okay, you're right.
Over here,
right.
Mrs. Boyce.
Yes, but that was always nice to be able to ring the bell for all the classes. That gave us a sense of purpose. It was kind of nice. The students and friends were, we had a lot of good friendships. There wasn't any real problems that I can remember in elementary. We had a lot of free time to express ourselves. I remember we had time in order to build forts out in this woodsy area where Rainbow Field is. And there was no restrictions on girls climbing trees. And for me, I'm a real climber, so that I spent half my hours in the trees around this place. Or the bamboo. Remember the bamboo thing over there by the school home? A huge bamboo thing? We didn't have restrictions. There were no restrictions on attire or clothing until we got into high school and the miniskirt came around. And and there was no one-upmanship in trying to wear a label of clothing. Of course, that was not part of society at that time anyway. But things were pretty much the 50s and early 60s when we were in elementary school. It's when we got into junior high school, the whole world started changing. So, of course, it affected Fairhope and the school as well. I've been talking a lot. I'll let you talk some.
Sounds good to me. I don't... You need to ask me something, I guess.
How did you feel about the high school and the academic work in the high school? Did you have any favorite teachers, any favorite subjects?
It was so laid back that I don't think I had any favorite subject or teachers. I remember going home, reading what I was supposed to read for the next day, and then that was it. And somehow it stuck enough, I guess.
Mrs.
It didn't seem, it wasn't, it was so unstructured, I guess, that's why it doesn't just sink in as anything, like I remember going to, I think for half a year in the 10th grade, I left and went to Fairhope High School. And I remember one class, algebra, that was horrible. I passed algebra here, but over there, the teacher just, I don't know, it was structured, it was rigid. You went through the entire book, which no teacher had ever done or has done since with me. And I remember that. Too much structure. I do
So I think,
remember
yeah.
a few teachers, not my favorites, but I remember, who was it, Prof?
Yeah.
Taught us Alabama history, I believe.
Yes, we had government one. And,
Civics.
Yeah, and Alabama history.
Crusty fella.
Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful teacher, but
Yeah,
his language sometimes wasn't most
Yeah.
desirable.
he was rough.
Yeah. Well, when we got Prof, he was easy to mislead. You have to ask him about, with Andrew Jackson, and Jackson was one of the things somebody would ask that every day, and he'd get off on a tirade, and we wouldn't end up covering our subject sometime. One thing I learned in high school, because I had such a unique array of teachers, that I learned how to get along in sometimes very difficult situations and how to deal with people. Because we had some teachers that actually, as looking back now, I feel, I don't necessarily give any names because the relative may watch the tape one day, but I think they were emotionally abusive to some particular students, looking back. And I was always kind of one who kind of liked to take people under my wing. And so I was very sensitive to those abuses. But some of the stellar people, I remember Mrs. Gwynn. She was our 11th grade English teacher. We only had her the 1 year. And Mrs. Stallings, and I'm still a good friend of Mrs. Stallings. And when I was in college, I would come back and she would help me with English projects and stuff like that. And she, even though she was raised and taught in a public school situation, to me, she was a true organic school teacher because she would do unique and interesting things. And she, along with, one thing about organic, we never had designated desks like you do at the public school. You come in, and each day you could sit in a different place if you wanted to. And that was always fun, and she was just one of my favorites.
I'd like to go back to that statement that Pagan mentioned, emotionally abusive. When Mrs. Johnson was alive, and many years after, perhaps not when you all were in the faculty meetings, one teacher would say, well, I'm having an awful time with John, and I think he should come out of the school. He's just a child we shouldn't have in the school. He's such a troublemaker. And the other teachers would be asked about how they were doing with Johnny. And this particular teacher was the only one that was having a problem with Johnny. Well, that showed the leadership that the problem wasn't Johnny, the problem was with the teacher. Now, I think that's happens. I think that was a very good protective situation for children, because that couldn't continue to exist emotionally abusive to a child during the time that I was associated with the school. That was very carefully watched. And you all apparently were.
Well, sometimes I think they got to the point where they had, I don't know if senility is it, but they were getting into age near. Of course, not everybody is. Some people get that way at 60. Some people last forever. But I think she should have been pulled out of the school, and she wasn't. And the other negative thing that I had was I had a teacher who, for me and one other girl in another math class, who today we consider sexual harassment. And we complained, and what happened was we were removed from the class. The teacher still taught. And that, to me, is not how the school should be run. There were no girls allowed in math class the following year. This is algebra and geometry. And so I didn't take it in the upper classes because we weren't allowed in there.
That showed real deterioration, didn't it?
Yeah. But I look back, and the positive things is we were allowed to be ourselves. We were allowed to, think for ourselves. I think that we had a lot of kids that came from the country who necessarily weren't all that mentally stimulated at home. And sometimes the class level of the work would go down to their level. And for those of us that were brighter in the class, it really wasn't always that fully challenging. There were a lot of areas that I think that in my education that are, just blanks, that I think now looking back, I would have loved to have studied in depth more, or at least touched the subject.
Well, you were talking about teachers. I remember my mother taught me 1 year, 2 years, but 1 year in particular. She sent me to the office. I think Mrs. Hughes was the principal then. I guess I thought my mother wasn't my mother or my teacher. I don't know what I was thinking.